Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm here to discuss and reflect upon the recent Ashes series that we've just witnessed in the UK, and of course it was a 2-2 result, which meant that Australia retained the Ashes and ultimately England just fell short of their goal of regaining the Ashes, but it was a phenomenal series, people, and I just want to dissect a few of the key talking points here. So first of all, the fifth Ashes test was phenomenal, and it was it had somewhat of the drama and suspense taken out of it by the fact that Australia had already retained the Ashes. Nevertheless, there was still something on the line. Australia wanted to win their first Ashes in the UK since 2001, and England wanted to draw the series because they felt that they'd earned that they'd played well enough to come away with at least a draw. So there was a little bit riding on it, and of course a little bit of a backlog from the controversy of the Lord's Test with the Jonny Bairstow run out, with maybe the rain affecting things at Old Trafford. I think England felt as if they wanted to end this series on their terms with a win. And going into that fifth day, it looked on a knife edge. It looked as if Australia had actually got themselves into a position where they could comprehend winning the game. I think there were 130 for naught or thereabouts overnight. Khawaja and Warner looking very solid at the crease, and the pitch not seeming to offer many demons for the England attack to really exploit. It seemed to be coming onto the bat fairly well. No vicious turn, no uneven bounce in any extreme way. So Australia set themselves up, and at lunchtime, when the rain came as well, Australia were 3 down. So England had taken those 3 quick wickets, and Australia had got themselves into a position where they were in a partnership with Steve Smith and Travis Head, looking solid. The rain came, and we were thinking at that point, it looks as if Australia might either ride this out and get the draw, or rain could curtail things and Australia would win the series 2-1, or Australia could even go on and get the runs themselves. But after that rain delay, England were phenomenal with the ball, and led by Chris Woakes, who had a phenomenal series, won the Player of the Series award, came in, took quick wickets, Moeen Ali contributing with some very well executed off-spin bowling. Like, he was putting it in dangerous areas, asking questions, testing the technique of the Australian batsmen. Do we come forward? Do we come back? Do we attack? Do we defend? And ultimately, he got a mixture of wickets. He got one where Cummins was trying to attack him and he got it caught at leg slip. There were others where they were trying to defend him. We saw the one where Steve Smith was nearly out, but Stokes dropped it in the celebration, and he was trying to defend that ball. So Moeen Ali was asking the question, putting it in that uncertain area where you're not quite sure as a batter what to do. So that was fantastic for Moeen Ali, but it was ultimately a stage that was set for Stuart Broad to take those final 2 wickets and end what's been a stellar career for the Nottinghamshire fast bowler. And taking that final wicket of Carey, the Australian wicketkeeper, it seemed an appropriate, fitting way for Stuart Broad to depart the scene, because as is his hallmark, he's very good at bowling around the wicket to left-handers. Now, I was listening to Nasser Hussain, I believe in the 4th test, or even earlier in the 5th test, where he was analysing why Stuart Broad is such a good bowler to left-handers, and I think a key part of it is he puts it on a really dangerous length where it's full enough to tempt the batter to drive, but it's not too full that they're getting half volleys. So he's putting it in I would say just fuller than a good length, and he's also using the variation of swing. So coming from around the wicket, sometimes it's going to go in on the angle, sometimes it's going to just move a little bit away, and he's not getting dramatic swing, he's getting just enough to take the outside edge of the bat, and that's exactly what happened with Carey in the final wicket. And you feel like it was an appropriate signature way for Stuart Broad to take that final wicket. And ultimately, it's his last test match, and what a way to retire, because how often have we seen Stuart Broad step up to the plate when it really matters? He's often been Ben Stokes' go-to guy in this Bazball era, but preceding that though, he's taken 600 plus test wickets. He's taken more wickets against Australia than any other cricketer in history, I believe, certainly from an English perspective, from an England cricket team. So, outstanding career from Stuart Broad. The 8 for 15 will always go down as a memorable marquee moment in his career, that Trent Bridge Test match in 2005 Ashes series. And yeah, and also the way he went out with a 6 in his last ball as a batter was incredible. And yeah, winning England that final test seemed such a fitting way for him to exit the stage. And just looking at the series as a whole, people, I think England can take a lot of heart from the way this Bazball is going, because they're showing an aggressive intent. They're showing an ability to score at 5, 6, 7 runs and over consistently over multiple sessions, put pressure on the bowlers. We saw that incredible innings from Crawley, that 189. And we also saw flashes from Joe Root, 100, a couple of big 50s. Ben Stokes himself, that incredible innings at Lords, but he also carried that on with a fine knock at Headingley. So England's bowlers as well coming to the party. Wood and Wokes really adding impetus for England from that third test onwards. Broad, as we've mentioned. And I think it did give Australia a little bit of food for thought. And at times, it was interesting to hear what Mark Taylor, former Australian captain, was saying on the coverage. He felt like Australia adopted this almost stubborn approach of, you're doing Bazball, we're doing anti-Bazball. We're going to show you how it's done in a more conventional, risk-averse way. And you feel like maybe at times they got themselves bogged down in that approach, especially in that first innings at the Oval where Labuschagne got 9 from 81 deliveries and Khawaja similarly stodgy run rate. You feel as if Australia were perhaps retreating into their shells a little bit too much. However, on the flip side, I do want to give some credit to Australia as well, because despite the fact they were up against it and they were being put under the pump from Bazball, they were still able to ultimately achieve their goal of retaining the Ashes, but also rein England in at points. So at times they got clusters of wickets when England got off to flying starts. Often Duckett and Crawley at the top of the order got England off to flying starts, and then Australia would pull England back, be it through Cummins or Stark. Those two bowlers in particular had good series. And obviously they had to cope with the loss of Nathan Lyon after the second test, and Pat Cummins was given a little bit of a unexpected problem to deal with. And whilst his captaincy limitations or his defensive tendencies were shown up in the sense of he would perhaps not trust his off-spinner Murphy as much as perhaps he could have done, or he was setting his fields too deep, or getting people on the boundary when they should have been up, and vice versa on the single when they should have been on the boundary. Just at times he was a little bit maybe not on top of that side of things. However, Australia did demonstrate that they're a very technically solid and a technically credentialed team. They've got batters that play shots in very conventional and traditional ways, and with Labuschagne and Smith, they've got two outstanding players who at times look really serene when they were at the crease. And I know they didn't get the quantity of runs that they can and that they have in the past. They still did contribute big, impressive, commanding innings. And Khawaja at the top of the order, top run scorer in the series, and he looked absolutely incredible at times with his cover driving, with his cutting. A hark back to the olden times when openers used to bide their time and be a bit more selective. So he was very impressive. As I mentioned, Stark and Cummins, and they showed a lot of quality. And for all England's spectacular, eye-catching, entertaining cricket, the wins that they registered were really tight. They only won by 3 wickets at Headingley, and they won by 50 runs at the Oval. So it was really close. And on another situation, Australia could have potentially pinched those 2 games. But then I suppose you could say the same about the first 2 tests that were also tight and could have gone either way. So overall, maybe 2-2 is a fair result. And I think both sides can actually be happy with it in a way. And how often do you see that in sport where both sides can be happy with the result? But I feel like with Australia, as I mentioned, people, they got the retention of the Ashes, which was ultimately their purpose when they arrived in England. And England themselves showing a lot of character and fight and fortitude to come back from 2-0 down to draw the series level at 2-2 and show a little bit of their own fight and spirit and pride and performance. And in that fifth test, I was particularly impressed with the Ashes gone, having been surrendered as a result of the Old Trafford draw. England was still able to pick themselves up and say, no, we're going to fight for this final win because we think we deserve this 2-2. So very interesting stuff, people. Those are my thoughts on the Ashes. Let me know if you have anything to add on it, and I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. But yeah, onwards and upwards, people. I can't wait for more Ashes cricket in a couple of years' time down under to see how Bazball evolves, fronts up, and to see how Australia also adapt their team. Will they look to move on some of the older members of the group? Perhaps the likes of David Warner. Will they usher in some new batters and new cricketers into their test team? So all to play for, people, and we'll be here to follow it as it unravels. Peace, love.